All right, so most of you know who I am. I think there's only one or two of you here who are new, so I'm going to introduce myself real quick. So I'm Davin Sturdivant. I'm owner here at NASRS, head coach, and also the guy that basically runs most of the stuff in the background. Um, we are trying to get back into the habit of doing more clinics because a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we used to do like technique clinics and more track guide walk clinics and a few other things. Michael Landry still does the track guide clinics when we have new tracks. We would go through them and he'll walk through stuff, but we haven't really been doing as many technique things. So at the end of last season, I asked you guys to send me some stuff that you guys wanted to talk about. I got a list. I pulled some things together, and I started putting together some 101 series stuff on a couple of items. So none of this stuff will be highly advanced. Most of it will be introductory. Most of the times, what we'll end up doing is we'll have give or take about an hour presentation on a topic. It's same as our rookie debriefs, right? Open forums to ask questions, all those other fun things. And then we'll spend some time on a particular server, and then we'll work through some stuff so you guys can get some practice. I'm breaking one of my rules this week by having us actually use the qualifying server this time around because the track that we're having upcoming for the beginning of the season is there. So I'd like you guys to just spend some time there, and then that's also a little bit of a benefit for those of you who haven't had a chance to qualify because you'll have done some laps and probably got a time on the board if by accident if you haven't done it already. Anyhow, okay. So before we dive into the overtaking part of it, there's a couple of mindset things we have to focus on before we kind of dig into this. So I'm going to talk a lot, and you're going to listen to a lot of things. Some of you will be paying attention, and some of you won't. It'll take time for some of the concepts to really sink in. And so the objective of this presentation is really just to expose you guys to a lot of things, not to give you a mastery of anything by the time you come out of it. So don't be frustrated if things don't quite make sense. Don't be overwhelmed if it seems like a lot of information. One of the reasons that we're recording it is so that you have a chance to kind of slow down and break things down later. But it is a ton. So have a learning mindset towards everything. Don't try to have a mastery mindset towards things. And I think it'll be easier to consume a lot of that information. So as we do with most of the clinics, the first thing I actually try to cover before we dive into the things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the things we're not going to talk about, just so that folks have a set of expectations. So the two things we're really not going to talk about today are going to be driving a specific track, like how do I pass on X track, or car-specific attributes or car-specific changes. So like how do I pass with a specific car, or how do I pass against a specific car. A lot of the technique-based things we will be talking about will be driver per driver, not so much car per car. So a lot of times, if you were to ask me that question, I'll go, it depends on how good the driver is. It depends on how fast they're going. It depends. So we're going to just skip all of those questions up front because we're talking about general concept and general theory. So what are we going to be covering? We're going to be covering kind of 5 main topics that I think are going to be important. One is the importance of the line. And what does the line mean when you're racing other cars versus being by yourself? The importance of overlap and giving racing room, like why is that critical to the being able to overtake and also being able to defend? The importance of patience and why that gives you ample time to gather critical information to make an attack or prepare for a defense. We're going to go through a quick exercise of what to look for when preparing for a pass. And then we're going to talk a little bit about defense and how to defend and the different types of defending. Like I mentioned down here, it's only going to be at a high level. There are very sophisticated and that sometimes psychological levels to driving that we are not going to get into today. We can talk about those another time, but this is stuff that you can talk for days and days and days if I let you. So a couple weeks ago, somebody asked me a question that has really stuck with me for a long time, and they asked me, Davin, how do I become good at something without putting in any practice? Like, I don't have a lot of time. How do I get good at something without really like putting in the grind? And I couldn't find a good way to answer that. I don't think that's a practical thing to do. In other disciplines, you wouldn't ask people who are good at something to take shortcuts, right? You don't ask a classical pianist for shortcuts if you want them to play in the orchestra. You don't ask a professional football player to take shortcuts if you want them to play in the NFL. You wouldn't ask a doctor for shortcuts if you want them to do good surgery. So when it comes to developing your racecraft skills, this will take a long time. and it'll take practice and it'll take patience. You're gonna have to fuck it up a lot. You're gonna have to practice with other people. You can read as much as you want to, and if you don't practice these things in practical application, you are never ever ever going to be good at them. So often the folks who suck the most at racing people race people the least, or they don't really assess or review or reflect over incidents they have in their racing, and they just kind of skip on to the next thing. They're not practicing appropriately, so they never get good at it. The other reason I also want to bring this up is, in my mind, there's sort of like a continuum of understanding when it comes to anything, right? So I kind of made this visual as far as what it kind of feels like when you're understanding a driving technique. And in the very beginning, you have a lot of confidence, but you don't really know a lot. And so, like, I run into people all the time who act like they know what they're doing, but then when you watch them drive, their driving is very terrible. And then they pick up a kind of a basic understanding of the fundamentals, and they're kind of playing around with that, but they're not really exploiting any major concepts or theories. They're not pushing anything. Then they start to kind of overdrive and they start to underdrive. So like when they start battling people, they start getting really aggressive with people and hitting them, or they sit behind them for a really, really, really long time and they don't really pass. And they're still kind of poking at the edges to kind of figure out what's working and what's not working. You do that enough times and you're kind of at the third bit, right? Where you see enough patterns and you're like, oh, when I see a car at point A and I'm at point B, I can do action C, right? And you start to practice and you start to sort of notice patterns and rhythms, and then you're able to complete more overtakes more often, or you're able to defend for longer because you've done a lot at it, right? And then you're at that kind of final bit where you kind of go, I know what I'm doing. And then once you reach that final bit, you'll run into someone who's faster than you and better than you at this, and this whole thing starts all over again. So one of the things that you need to probably keep in mind as you're developing your driving over time is that there's always a bigger fish, right? There's always someone faster. There's always someone better. And that's what makes the art of driving fun, right? Is that there's always another challenge to overcome. And so as you are, practicing these things and, kind of defining your technique and kind of building up your skills, or maybe getting to a better belt if you guys took martial arts, understand there's always going to be another opponent that's going to stress your understanding, right? They're going to stress your theory. They're going to stress the application. And that's a good thing, right? If you're constantly winning battles without any effort, you need to find harder people to battle, because that will be what makes you better. So you've seen this picture before. I know you have, because I've posted it all over the Discord. So if you stop listening to me from this point on, the one thing that you need to take away from this is you need to start racing with more people if you want to be better at racing people. Racing with the AI kind of only sort of does it, right? Because there's not a lot of dynamic, strategic variability that comes with racing with the AI. They're easy to predict. They're easy to manipulate. People are unpredictable. People do unpredictable things. People will surprise you by doing smart things you're not expecting. People will surprise you by doing dumb things that you don't expect. And by building up that repertoire of, working with a whole bunch of different people from a bunch of different skill levels, that's how you develop the confidence in your ability to race. So that's why House of Practice exists, right? That's why I encourage folks to find battle buddies and race with them and talk with them and work through this as a collective group. It is impossible for you to do it by yourself. It is literally not possible, because the art of racing requires another person. So if you're shy, you're going to have to get over that, because that is the way that you figure out what's working and what's not working. Otherwise, you're going to take the longest route to get there, because you'll make a lot of mistakes and you'll never have any feedback about what those mistakes were. You won't really know what you need to do to improve, or if you do figure it out, it'll take you an extremely long time. And if that's the route you choose to take, then I wish you the best. But for those who would like to kind of get up to speed a little more quickly, you have to be involved. Okay, so let's talk about racing. Nothing's perfect in all of this, right? We're going to be talking about a lot of theory, but the application is very messy, right? Battles are never perfect. People don't always follow the same rules, even though there are some rules of engagement. The car is never going to be perfect. The track is never going to be perfect. It's hard to be inch perfect, right? The best drivers learn how to adapt to the situation at hand and give themselves the best competitive advantage, right? I've won races in cars that I've been slow in, like when I'm in the slowest car, because I've learned how to adjust the situation to my advantage to get to the end of the race, right? I've also raced against people who are just so fast that all you can do is follow them for the entire time because nobody made a mistake, and all we're just doing is playing a game of chess from beginning to end, kind of waiting for the mistake that never comes, right? So you have to be willing to deal with a little bit of mess to get good at racing, because it's not going to be a classroom environment most of the time. It's going to be down and dirty. It's going to be rough and tumble, things like that. Okay, so first reason why you're struggling at racing: you're not paying attention to enough stuff. You don't pay attention to where your car is on the track. You don't pay attention to where your opponent is on the track and their racing line in position to yours. A lot of you don't pay attention to what corners you're in because you can't tell me. You're just like, I'm in the left-hander next to the right-hander. You don't know where you are. And you also don't pay attention to enough various track elements around you that will give you key information on when to attack, or if you're in the right spot, or what to do. Novice drivers ignore these things all the time. And they, fortunately, are all very fixable. But if you're not paying attention to the details, you can't be good at racing, because passing cars is all about details. Pop quiz. What did I just say?
Racing cars is all about details.
Slide.
But novices are never paying attention.
Pay attention.
Almost. It's still not even close, though.
Oh.
We're good at this.
Oh, you're so good.
Mm-hmm.
You basically have to adapt. You know, the conditions are not going to be perfect.
You're not reading the instructions that are on the screen.
You're not paying attention to where you are on track. You're not paying attention or to other things around you, or where the other car is in relation to you or relation to the track.
Nico's got it. See, Nitin's got it. See, that level of attention is what I mean, right? When you get information in front of you, you need to be able to pay attention to that information and be able to act upon it, right? So this is kind of one of those exercises that I use for a lot of folks to kind of see who's paying attention to the things that I'm saying, because if you're not paying attention to little details, a lot of the other stuff we talk about when it comes to racing is going to be extremely difficult, because a lot of this is a detail-oriented stuff, right? And that's why you struggle. All right, let's talk about the driving line. So traditionally, when you guys are told about the driving line, you're talked to about what we call the traditional driving line, right? The out in out sort of thing, or, you know, touching the apex in certain places, or all of that, right? That is only one line. In fact, when you look at a corner, there are an infinite number of lines that drivers can take to negotiate the corner, right? You just need to adjust what you need to do in order to negotiate the corner, right? You change your braking, you change your turn-in, you change the amount of throttle, right? Anytime you're running off that optimal line, you're going slower than you could be, but there's multiple ways to do it. So, you know, RaceCraft is basically the principle of removing your opponent's options of racing line choices without reducing your own to leave yourself open to attack. So you need to be able to visualize multiple lines at once when battling other cars, because you need to be able to anticipate where they are going to be, or where they could go, or where you need to put your car and how you need to adjust your car in order to get the outcome that you want. So if you have a very good understanding of what the optimal racing line is, it's easy then to adjust off of it. If you don't understand what the optimal racing line is, it's very, very difficult, because you're kind of in a black box, right? You don't know if you should be braking earlier. You don't know where to adjust to, because you don't know in an ideal situation, where should I have been? And so it makes racing more difficult. So the first thing I always recommend folks do is really understand what the ideal line is around a racetrack, because that is your template. That is your framework for everything else when it comes to racing other cars. And then as you start to follow other cars, you'll look at them and say, oh, are they on the racing line or not? Right? If they're not on the racing line, they're going to be slow. If they are on the racing line, are they going the right speed? Right? If they're on the racing line and going the right speed, we're not going to be able to pass them, because we're both going to be doing similar things. So you need to be able to notice those things quickly and be able to set up, and we'll talk about what the setup is later, but be able to set up for attacks, or be able to set up for defenses by knowing what the line is and knowing where you are. Does that make sense for folks?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Any questions? All right, no questions. All right, so racing. I'm going to use a lot of non-car references a lot of times here because otherwise it gets boring. So, to me, racing is a duel or a dance between two opponents, right? You need to have patience to identify the right opportunity to pass somebody. Because my objective as the car trying to make a pass is to get the pass done once and then move on to the next car. I'm not trying to dance around with the car in 8th place for forever. I'm trying to win the race. So if I'm taking opportunities that are going to leave me open for attack later or slow down the race where the cars ahead of me get away, it's not worth it to me to make those passes because my overall objective is to get to the front of the race and win. If I'm dilly-dallying around just doing these half-hearted things, we're never going to get where we want to go. Okay. The second part is I got to respect my opponent because he's got to have some right to room. I've got to have some right to room. I can't just drive him off the road. I can't just drive into his door. I want him to give me ample space when I'm trying to make a move, and it's kind of a do unto others sort of thing, right? If I screw him, he'll screw me. So I don't want to be screwing the guy if I can help it, because at least then it gives us the best opportunity to be going as fast as possible, as safely as possible, to get as far ahead as possible. You know, you want to have good general technique to be able to control your car, right? We're not really going to talk about car control here, but it's kind of a prerequisite to be able to do this well, right? So this is where working with a coach is really helpful. This is where identifying if you're on the right line is really helpful. This is where having a good amount of seat time is helpful, because if you don't have good driving technique, you can't execute any of these things. And then you need to be able to understand timing of when a good opportunity shows itself. And we'll talk about some of those opportunities later. Right, but just to give you guys a 100,000-foot view, right? It's not just, oh, I caught a car, right? It's also the big picture of the whole race, right? Are there cars in front of me that I need to prepare for? Are there cars that are coming up that are faster than me that might actually slow me down? So I need to either get this done early, or do I need to just wait for somebody else to do the work for me? There's big picture concepts that we'll kind of touch on briefly that will help you when you think of your racecraft all up. It's not just kind of like I need to pass them immediately sort of thing. Okay. So when we look at overtaking, there are kind of 4 key things you need to be good at when it comes to your ability to overtake cars. Number 1, you need to know where you are on the track, the racing line, and what corner you're in. Number 2, you need to be able to identify your opponent's weaknesses clearly. Are they slow somewhere? Are they in a bad? Are they slow somewhere? Are they wobbly behind other cars? Do they miss the apex in a particular corner? Do they drive worse when you're tailgating them? Those sorts of things, right? Have a plan of attack ahead of time, right? Sometimes that plan of attack can be kind of spur of the moment. Like there are some corners where, like I know on certain tracks, I can identify quickly when to pass somebody and I can just move on. But often I have to set them up. And I have to be like, okay, I've seen for a few laps this guy is slow. I can attack him in turn 5 at Brands because he always misses the apex. I need to have my car on the left so that I'm really able to swoop in underneath him. But I need to have the appropriate setup in order to do that. Right? If I just tailgate him, I'll screw myself. So let's make sure I'm in the right positioning. Right? This is all chess. And then the 4th bit is you need to be able to leave racing room for your opponents on both sides. Because if you both are going for the same piece of road, eventually you'll crash and somebody ends up off the road and it's no good. So, knowing where you're on track, I'm going to just be real brief about this. Everyone just needs to go and learn track maps. That's the TLDR of this, right? This is like the level in the video game, right? If you're playing a first-person shooter, for example, if you don't know how many levels there are or how many rooms there are or if there are any trapdoors, you get shot every time and you die. Right? Racing is the same way. If you don't know the types of corners, if you don't know their angle of attack, the inclination, if you don't know those things, it's very difficult. Learning turn numbers makes that easier because then mentally you can just kind of set up your preparation more quickly. Right? It's also very difficult for anyone to help you if you can't tell me 13 places on the racetrack. Right? You don't need to do a lot of turning really over the course of a lap, honestly, even on the most complicated of tracks. So it is very, very frustrating when someone comes to me and is like, well, you know, I'm trying to see if I can pass kind of in that high-speed right-hander. Like, that's annoying. It's turn 8. Just learn it. right? When you know those things, it'll make it easier to kind of understand where I should be trying to attack and where I shouldn't. Because there are a lot of places where like trying to make a pass doesn't really help you, right? So like, for example, turn 7 on Paul Ricard, because we're going to spend some time here later. Turn 7 on Paul Ricard is a place where there's a long, long straightaway with a lot of open space. So if you are the lead car coming out of that corner, you're the first car to hit a big wall of open air and you go the slowest. So it may not make sense to pass a car coming out of turn 7 and lead it down the straight because you are the most susceptible to being drafted. And then when you get to 8 and 9, you're the weakest. You don't want that, right? If you know about your turns, it is easier to plan. So I may be in second place as we're coming through turn 7. I will sit behind the car that I'm chasing going down the straight because I've got the best chance for a draft. And I'll pass somewhere like in turn 10. Because it's a slower speed corner and I can kind of get away in that section. Or I'll pass somewhere like on 12 or 13 because the track bends away there, right? But I don't want to pass coming out of 7 because I'm a sitting duck for the whole straightaway. That's no good, right? Things like that, right? So don't be lazy. So like, just go, if you don't want to go and check the ACC chat map channel, which I don't know why you wouldn't because they're literally all right there and they all have turn numbers on them, you can Google this stuff and that will help you. So just learn tracks. We talked a little bit about this. Overtaking can take several corners to properly set up, or even several laps to set up, right? So just because you catch someone immediately doesn't mean you have to overtake them immediately. Let's go back to the turn 7 example, right? Just because I catch someone coming out of turn 6 and 7 doesn't mean I want to pass them there immediately. There are certain times where a premature pass will leave you vulnerable. There are also times where a half-hearted pass will also leave you vulnerable. Either because you didn't get it done soon enough, or because it makes your opponent aware of you, and now they will be overly defensive, which also makes you slower. So this is chess, right? You have to plan several moves ahead. And so the more information you can gather about setting up your attack, the more likely you're going to be effective in having absolute advantage, not just kind of like tickling them and hoping that it works. Does that make sense for folks?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So we talk about this a lot, and I think a lot of people have probably been on the negative side of this, which is having a lack of patience. Patience is critical for good racing because you need to be able to pass every car without breaking your car. And that requires a little bit of preparation because a bunch of stuff is happening. So when you are racing other people, you need to be paying attention to them because they will give you key information on how we race that particular person. Some people, for example, don't know the racing line. And so it's easy to pass them because they're just slow everywhere. So you don't need to do a lot of preparation. Other folks are faster and they know the racing line. So you can't just throw your car up next to them. They have enough experience and spatial awareness to say, hey, that car won't make it. So I don't need to adjust for them. You lose out entirely and they just drive away. That's no good. So you'll need to follow them and watch them and pay attention, pull up some information. As you get more experience with racing, you'll start to kind of look at the bigger picture of an overall battle and say, if I'm in third and I'm trying to go for the lead, does it make sense to try to battle a guy for second early on if the leader gets away? Because even if I pass the guy for second, I'm still only going to be in second and I want to win. So shouldn't we all get into a train and work together and battle when it's more appropriate? Either we're farther away from the guy in fourth place, or we're catching a piece of lap traffic where it's easy for me, or it's in a pit stop when there's a big change in delta. It doesn't mean don't pass, right? If someone gives you an easy goal, take it. But a lot of times, and I see this a ton in rookies, everyone's so desperate to make a position, they don't notice how much all the cars space out right away. And so the guy in 15th only ends up in like 14th because the other guys in front of them all drove away. Or the guy that was in third could have won the race, but he was so damn focused on trying to pass second place that they let the leader get away. And so now there's a 10-second lead gap they have to close down. And that's impossibly hard. Where if they'd all stayed together, it could have been a 3-second gap, could have been a 2-second gap. And that's much, much easier. So sometimes not doing anything is the best way to prepare to do something later, rather than desperately doing something badly that doesn't come off the way that you want.
Excuse me, Davin. Could you say that learning the drivers in front of you is a good thing?
Yes. In front of you and behind you, right? Because I need to know the behaviors of people around me, because sometimes other people do suboptimal things. I'm trying to be polite, right? There are some people that I race that I have to drive differently until we are far enough away so they stop becoming a disaster, because they see opportunities that don't yet exist, and they will throw their car into open gaps that aren't quite there, and then we lose so much time as I'm dancing around with them that the guy I'm trying to pass gets away. So as I'm practicing and spending time in a house of practice, I'm looking at drivers all the time, just how they drive, how they race with other people. I watch other people in other races. I'll chase you guys around and follow you and watch you, because I need that information for the important race later, right? And then all of that data becomes useful in battles, because some folks I can sit on the racing line and I know they won't throw it up the inside of me and we'll just be nice friends. Other folks, I have to be defensive super early just so we can get away. All right. And so knowing the folks around you is super, super important. Okay. So we're going to do a quick example of what do you look for when trying to set up a pass. Right? There are 3 key things in this shot that are going to tell me that a pass is likely to come soon. Can someone tell me what they think some of those things are? You do not need to get all of them.
I'm not allowed to say anything.
You're not allowed
right
to say anything right now.
We're going around quickly. Right-hander, the car on the left side in front is, depending on his speed, and it's probably, it might end up very much on the left side, if not on the in the sand. So it all depends. But he has not covered the apex, so that's open.
You got 2 of them.
Yeah, he's gonna have to slow down way too much, because he's gonna end up in the sand, like you said.
He's gonna be
Peter.
slow on exit. You're gonna be fast.
Oh, do you want to say the important bit? Because you're talking about the consequences, but what's the actual case that happened here?
Right.
Davin's fast. Other cars.
He's off the line.
Haha.
There he is. He's off the line. He's off the line. Yep. But the speed is important. There's a third one that folks have not caught on, and I'll give you a minute just to try to guess what that is. There's nothing to do with the car in front. It's more to do with where we are.
The corner is a downward.
The next corner is a large braking zone.
The next corner is a large braking zone. There you go. All right. So the first question you're asking, am I close enough to my opponent with the speed we're carrying? You know, I know it's a static image, but in this case we were. So I know I've got momentum on him. I know I've got speed on him. That's good. Is he on the racing line? No. Which is a huge indicator that he will be slower than me as we go around the corner and on the next exit. And then, importantly, is there ample room for me to get alongside him coming out of this corner? Yes. So, with all of these things being true, I have a good opportunity to try to make a pass, right? A lot of folks aren't paying attention to one of those 3 things as they're driving around. So, they will, and I've got some screenshots of some, offline driving that kind of might drive this a little bit home soon, but like they will be on an equally as bad line as their opponent, or they won't be moving quickly enough because they're too close, or they're trying to do something too far behind, or most importantly, the corner that's coming up doesn't really give you enough time to negotiate next to them and do anything, and so they get all up alongside them with no real plan. And then they're just kind of there, and then they're just kind of squeezed, or they do the move too late and there's not enough room and they're just kind of squeezed, right? So a lot of moves you see that are done with confidence is because there's enough room for us to do everything. There's speed, there's space, and there's room, right? If I've got all those things, I can do something with it. If I don't, I might have to wait and try again when I have some other time.
I actually want to quickly mention those answers that you were giving to Davin to the what is the thing you're looking for are kind of indicative. All of the things that you actually want to be looking at are very simple yes/no questions. You don't care if he's gonna end in the sand or whatever. That's way too complicated. All you care is, can I get a run? Is there room? Can I get something done here? And it's a very kind of simple question. Like, you don't need to worry about, well, is he gonna be into sand, whatever. That's just extra stuff.
Yeah. There's also not a lot of time, right? Like, we're going through a corner really fast, so I don't really have time to think about it a lot. It's just like, is he missing the line? Yep, good. Right? Am I on the line and moving quick? Yep, good. and by the time we get to the end of the corner, I'll have some time to figure out if this is working or not. And then as we're going into the next corner, I'll see if I'm alongside him or not. And if I'm not, then I bail out quickly and I reset. Right. But I don't try to force a move that is just going to be me trying to fix the fuck up because I didn't meet all the other criteria beforehand.
Quick question: does anybody recognize the corner on which track?
Yep.
That's one at Brands.
Well, at least somebody knows where they're at.
Right, exactly. At least they know where we are.
Which is, by the way, the best overtaking opportunity on the whole track. This particular one.
Yeah, a lot of folks they don't notice the entry here, and so they end up being too tight on the entry, and it screws them all the way over. And as you start to race more and race more cars more, you'll start to get more sensitive to positioning. And sometimes you can position your opponent on a bad line on purpose if they're not paying attention. And so there's kind of a shifting scale, right? So a novice driver, if you put them offline, will just continue to use the same racing speed on a bad line and drive off the track. So they're very easy to pass. You can just kind of go up next to them and kind of intimidate them, and they don't know where they are to begin with, so they just drive right off the road, right? A more intermediate driver will adjust his driving. And so he'll realize he's not on the racing line. He'll brake a little early or, do a little adjustment to make sure that he makes the corner. He'll be slow, but he'll know he'll be slow and he'll kind of be in the way. So it's up to you to not run up the back of him or have enough space so that you go by. And then the advanced driver will be, if he's not fast enough to go through the corner and just use speed as a defense, because speed is always your best defense. If he's not going to do that, then he'll be just off the racing line enough to stop you from passing, but not so much that he's just dog shit slow. And those guys are the ones that you will spend a long, long time behind because they know what they're doing. They're doing it on purpose. And typically they're either doing it on purpose because they either A, are struggling with their own racing line, B, are struggling with their own car, or C, just stalling for time. And so depending on the type of driver you're negotiating with, you can kind of pay attention to what you need to do to get them in the right spot. And then as you become that more experienced driver, you'll know how to adjust your driving as necessary. When there's a big discrepancy between the skill levels of those drivers, that's when a lot of frustration can kick into play. I see this a lot where I'll be offline defending and a fast but novice racer will just slam into me because they don't know that I'm going to be slow and they are not going to adapt for that slow moving car. So they just drive through at the same full speed that they want to and then run right into me. Kind of frustrating. So you have to do things then to slow them down before you get through the corner because you kind of have to babysit them, right? They don't know what they're doing, so you've got to do it for them.
Can I mention something here, Davin?
Yeah, what's up?
Like what Ilpo says, yes, no, and yes and no on that corner. I'm looking at the same thing he's saying, but I'm a very patient racer when I race. One thing that's not on there is, well, if he's going fast enough and I can't pass him, let's just say we give it a try and it doesn't work. Well, let's see if he does it again next time around, because maybe that's the line he uses. And I'm sure you're mentioning it, but that's where that patience fits in.
Yeah.
Take your time because there's a little bit more of a race to go here. So let's see if he does it again. Then next time you're preparing yourself for it.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Awesome.
That also falls under the idea of learn the guy in front of you.
Yeah.
Take the time to recognize the things that he's doing that are either good or bad or slightly better than you or slightly worse than you, and you can kind of gauge the situation better next time around.
Yep, exactly. And that kind of leads perfectly into the third point, right? Have a plan of attack ahead of time, right? So is our opponent consistently missing the same corner? Because if they are, that's great. I can plan for that and really set up a clean pass. I don't have to desperately scrabble, right? Am I dramatically faster than somebody several laps in a row, or a really noticeable run on somebody? And if so, why? Right? If we're both on the racing line and I just have a big run on somebody, that's interesting, right? And that might be something I might want to use a little later, right? One thing that a lot of people don't really pay attention to is there traffic ahead or some obstacle ahead that will slow down my opponent for me if we just wait a little bit? So sometimes it is better to just let your opponent catch the guy in front and then get slowed down naturally by that, so that you can attack them then, rather than attacking them early and letting that obstacle get farther away. Backmarker traffics are great for this. People who are having battles ahead of you Also great for this, right? I don't need to do all the work. I just need to pass the guy in front of me. So if I can use other things to make the work easier for me, I'm going to use that rather than forcing things. Because the more I force it, the more information I'm giving the guy I'm trying to pass that, hey man, this car behind you is trying to pass you, and he will change his driving eventually. So I need to be able to do it in a way that is clear and decisive, but also doesn't give my opponent enough time to come up with their own strategy. Because once they have their own strategy, I have to come up with a new one, and that sucks. For lap cars, it's the same thing, right? Am I about to get caught by like a lap traffic or a guy that is suddenly very quick, or let's say somebody who's out of position because they started in the back or whatever, that you can use to slow down the guy you're actually racing, right? I know we've all seen this in rookies 1,000 times, right? Some guy on the lead laps coming through and racing some guy for 17th and 18th, and the guys in 17th and 18th are battling so far, like so hard and so aggressively, they aren't really thinking about the fact that there's a fast-moving car behind them, that if you worked with that fast-moving car, the guy in 18th could pass the guy in 17th. So let the guy who actually knows how to go fast do the work, and you can just follow him. It's cheaper than trying to do all the work yourself, and then having to slow down for the fast-moving car that's never going to go away. Right? So in cases where you can manipulate the cars around you to your advantage, you want to do that. Because if I'm in 18th and I'm racing the guy for 17th, I don't want to have to pass my opponent and then slow down. I want to get my spending done early. I would like to slow down early and then spend the rest of the time going fast. So I'm going to use the guy that's in the lead to open a door for me. Right? At the very least, maybe he'll show me how to do it. Because if I couldn't get it done, maybe I can watch the guy that's in the lead make the pass more easily than I could. And I can go, oh shit, I'll try that the next lap. Right? So it's paying attention to those little details will help you. There's multiple ways to do it. All right. So common mistakes that people make while not passing. We have to talk about this because I see a lot of people often spending a lot of time and effort not doing anything. And so this is important. The first thing I see is people who are too aggressive trying to pass without a clear way to get overlap and make their way through the corner. So anytime you are not on the racing line, you are going to go slow. So in this screenshot, it's me and another car. I am definitely not on the racing line. So I am definitely going to be slow. But the car behind me is on an even worse line. And they're going to go even slower. And this will not get better. So often you see people who are coming up on you and you're running out of room at the end of the straightaway. There's no way they're going to be able to get up alongside you or make a move, but they still go to the inside anyway. And they just sit behind you because physics and the line dictate that that is impossible. Unless I crash, you're not going to make it by. You're just going to sit there. And that is frustrating. What's worse is that you telegraph to me that, hey man, I'm going to try to pass you super aggressively. And so you are making it way more likely that the car in front is going to defend more often, which makes us even slower because I'm aware of you. And that really sucks. Right? So you really want to be patient and really plan passes when you have an absolute advantage, right? If you let your opponent sink into your rhythm and see you coming, they will drive to defend you. But if you let your opponent kind of just drive at their own pace, you can attack them when they're weak. And that makes it a lot easier. You want to attack when you're strong and they're weak. You don't want to both be weak because then nothing ever happens. Another thing folks do is they follow their opponents too closely. This is a trick that I use when I'm leading. But when you're chasing, following a slow car closely only makes you slow. Because you can only go the speed of the slow car in front of you. So you need to be able to have enough space between you and the car in front of you to see where they are slow and attack them, not suffer because of their slow speed. Does that make sense for folks?
Yep.
Do folks notice themselves doing that a lot?
Yep.
And part of the reason they do that a lot is because they're so excited to pass. They're not really thinking about the big picture, right? Oh, I'm on his tail. Well, if you're going 10 kilometers an hour too slow, who fucking cares, right? Like, we're trying to get by this guy. We're not trying to date this guy, right? So notice that they're slow, back off a little bit, watch their line, see why their line sucks, and attack them. Don't just follow them around for forever, right? Because a car that is farther behind you will roll right up on you and roll right on by you and be like, oh, thanks for the 2-for-1, right? You don't need that, right? You want to get back on the racing line. You want to look at your opponent. You want to see how far off the racing line are they? How slow does that make them? Can I attack them here? Oh yeah, definitely doing that, right? And then wham, be done. Don't just sit there behind them. Because again, going back to that scale of what does a novice driver do and what does a advanced driver do, an advanced driver will run the clock out on you, right? I don't care how much farther I am ahead of this car if I'm leading at all. 0, none. I don't. I just need to be ahead of you. I do not care if it is 1/10 of a second. I don't care at all. So I will sit there and I will slow you down and I will run the clock out until the race is over. I don't need to be 10 seconds ahead. I don't need to be a mile ahead. I just need to be ahead of you. So if you're not going to pay attention and you're going to sit behind me for 35 minutes, I'm going to let you do that. And then I win.
Use him as a blocker from behind.
Yeah, it's not my fault that you didn't pay attention. And it's not my fault that you're frustrated. It's not my fault that you sat there. I still won the race. So I sucks, right? So you don't be that guy, right? You want to back off and observe, because you could back off 10 feet. And that 10 feet is the difference of being able to pass the car in front versus not being able to. Because you can see them and see the mistakes they're making and saying, oh, hey, if I brake here and turn here, I'll just be right by. Done. Easy. Right? So if you find yourself catching a car in front, remind yourself, hey, I was driving fast enough to catch him. So I already know I can drive fast enough. That's not the problem. Right? So let's back up a little bit and look at the bigger picture. Give ourselves some more information. Why is this car so slow all of a sudden? Why is he not getting away? Or why are we going the same speed all of a sudden? Once you're able to see that stuff, it makes it a lot easier to plan attacks, because it'll almost be a big duh, right? Like, oh, he's shit through turn 1 because this line's too far to the inside. I can take care of that, right? So don't make these common mistakes, because these are the people who sit behind me for 45 minutes and then they're like, Davin, you're difficult to pass. It's not that I'm difficult to pass. It's that you're driving really slow and inattentive. That it's really, I'm not doing anything different than what I was doing before. You're just not paying attention. So, when's a pass complete? So,
please, if anybody has questions, ask up now.
Yeah, or anytime. So this is important because this is not a stewarding conversation. This is a driver RaceCraft kind of giving racing room conversation, right? So I'm going to leave any of the how things are judged or how they're scored completely out of this discussion. But to me, a proper pass is completely completed when the passing car can clear the car he is passing without running them off the road. Right? So missing the apex and driving into the car in front of them does not count as a clean pass. In my mind, hitting the car in front after they've turned into a corner is not very smart driving. And you probably have heard me complain about this a ton. If a car is already turning into the corner and you are trying to dive into them, you are too late, because they have already committed to the turn. They are not looking for you. They are looking for the road. So you are going to drive into what we're going to cover in a couple of minutes, the vortex of danger, because you are too late. And a lot of times I see this happening at the end of like braking zones and stuff, right? A lot of times, when we talk about overlap, we'll get here in a minute, right? But a lot of this is dictated based on the braking performance of the cars. And so a lot of people do what I call they F1 somebody, right? They drive in at full speed. They try to hit the brakes as late as possible. They hit the brakes past their qualifying braking point, miss the corner, run right into the car in front of them. The reasons they do that: one, they don't know where they are on the road. So they are off the racing line trying to brake later than they would on a qualifying lap. That doesn't make any sense. You will miss the corner 100% of the time doing that. And so it tells me that this driver doesn't know what they are doing, right? There are a couple times where you can get really, really close and get up next to the car and kind of get it working, but that's like an edge case, right? Most of the time, that late braking point is there for a reason, because it's where the car needs to have room to slow down. If you're not aware of those things, you just get so caught up with trying to pass that you see the guy's lights come on and then you're like, I'll just put my lights on later. I mean, what sense does that make? You're just going to hit them. So you have to have that mindfulness. That's why patience and setup and all those things are so important. So then when you're preparing for a pass, you're being smart rather than just like, well, frankly, being dumb.
Forcing your way through.
Right, just forcing your way through. It's crappy driving, which is frustrating. It's annoying to race against because people just think that you're going to run into them all the time. It is frustrating, I'm sure, from a stewarding perspective, because there's a lot of avoidable incidents that are avoidable because they're called fucking avoidable and they're avoidable, right? And it makes the whole experience less fun, right? Doesn't mean accidents don't happen. Shit, I've hit just as many cars as I've passed, but I try not to do it overly aggressively. I try not to do it brazenly, right? In a way that's just like, well, I didn't give a fuck about that guy. I just hit him. That sucks. Don't be that person. Okay, so I'm gonna take a pause for a minute because we're gonna make a concept change in just a minute. So before I do that, I need to see if anyone has any questions so far.
Not for me.
By the way, I've also noticed that we have 2 new names here to NASRS, Vendetta and D. Jones. I don't recognize you, but thank you for being here.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna keep going unless people have questions. So, why overtaking on the exit is easier than overtaking on the entrance. So, if there's anything that sticks with you with driving, is that corner exit speeds and exits should be the most important thing that you focus your attention on. And the reason why that is that is when the car has the most room to do anything, and that is what dictates your speed into the upcoming corners. So, a lot of folks, when they think of passing, they think of passing on the brakes, right? Because I guess it's just kind of visually, when you think of a pass, you want to get them before they turn. I don't really care where I get my opponent. Really. I don't care if I get them coming out. I don't care if I get them coming in. I don't care if I get them in the middle. I just want to get them. So I go from right to left on priority of what I try to focus my attention on, of where I really want to try to pass people. You know, the easiest one is going to be on the exit. Right? It's easiest to pass on the exit because there's a lot of room for my car to accelerate and do things. There's a lot of space for overlap. It's less risky, and especially if the guy in front of me is slow, it's easy. Overtaking on the entry, though, is really hard because it requires precision and good speed control. I also have to have good overlap because I don't have a lot of room. So I need to be able to get up alongside the guy next to me, let him see me, maneuver with them, and we both have to make the corner together. Passing on the brakes is harder than passing on the gas, because when you're on the gas, you're leaving a place with room to go into the next one. When you're passing on the brakes, you're running out of room as you're entering a new one. So, you know, a lot of folks don't really focus on exit-oriented passing. Right? They're so focused on getting the guy on the brakes and braking later that they work way too hard trying to pass cars, when if they would just focus on getting a good roll out of the corner they were in, focus on having a good draft or a good exit, or wait for the guy in front to be slow going into a corner, you can have way more overtaking, like way more passes than you thought possible, because you don't need to do anything. Your car will just accelerate on its own and you'll just drive right by, right? So think about that as you're passing cars, right? Is there a way I can pass this guy on the exit? Is there a way I can make it easier for myself? Right? Rather than just trying to be brave and be like Senna and dive in on somebody, right? Like the one on the right is the advanced one, right? The one on the left is the easy one.
I would note that even moves that actually happen on brakes usually are initiated on the previous exit, because you do need to get the overlap. Mm-hmm. Like if you're so far behind that there is actually a gap between you, it's very hard, if not impossible, to outbrake someone, especially in cars that have ABS.
Yep, ABS and similar performance, especially. Yeah, 100%. So, you know, to Ilpo's point, when you pass a car, it's not because of the corner you were immediately in. It was because of the corner before and the sequence of the corners before that. And so, you know, if we're just going the same speed when we enter turn 2, let's say at Brands, and we're both doing exactly the same speed, I can't just all of a sudden go faster because we're already at the same speed. We're going to be decelerating at similar spaces, right? Like there's too much that's the same. So I need to wait till I have an advantage where I can exit more quickly. That either means that I need to drive faster, which is hard because I was already going as fast as I could go, or the guy in front of me needs to slow down, which is quote unquote easier, because if they're making mistakes, they'll be driving slower. If something in front of them slows them down, they'll be driving slower, right? If you notice, we haven't really even talked a lot about like how to get next to somebody on the brakes or like any of those things yet, right? Because all of overtaking is about the setup and the preparation to pass, right? The passing is just the execution of properly prepared setup, right? It shouldn't really be a surprise most of the time, right? Most people who get passed should see it coming because you've followed all the rules of engagement, you've given them room, you've come up next to them, you've done all these things, and both of you can kind of negotiate together to get through the corner okay. It shouldn't be this like, I was turning into the corner and then all of a sudden I just saw a dart out of nowhere and then I just happened to not die, right? These happen. We've all done them. We will continue to do them, but that shouldn't be the plan, because 9 times out of 10, they don't come off. Those are the ones where you drive right into the rear quarter of somebody and spin them around, right? Because you didn't have enough room, time, space. You weren't driving fast enough. You weren't paying attention. So. Yep, X is better than entries. We can skip this. But if I'm going to leave this here for a minute, because this should be a thing you guys should be focusing on. Like, even when you're just learning a new track, start with trying to get the best exits you can. If you get into the habit of finding the best corner exits you can, learning tracks even becomes easier. Because as you're approaching every corner, you're like, did I get a good exit out of that? Well, I have to have a good entry to get a good exit. So let me fix my
turn
line.
2 at Brands.
Yeah, just anywhere. It just doesn't really matter where it is. I mean,
Nope, that looks just like turn 2 at Brands.
It kind of does, yeah. Or turn 8 at Paul Ricard, or anywhere, right? If you work your way backwards through a corner and say, where is the best exit? How do I get there? Versus how do I go into this corner as quickly as possible? It does become a lot easier because you're just deconstructing the corner rather than trying to solve a puzzle in the middle. So, think about that as you're kind of figuring out, where you want to get passes and how you want to get close to people, is how do you get a good exit? And that will help you a lot versus like just carrying in crazy entry speed. If it was just about carrying entry speed, I mean, we wouldn't need this entire damn presentation. I would just say, throw the fucking car in as fast as possible and hope for the best. All right. So I made a section on appropriate overlap and what that means because, first of all, every league is going to have a different point of view of what overlap means and acceptable overlap is. So this isn't a hard and fast rule. I think for NASRS, really, it's more about making sure that the passes are as safe as possible. And so, I expect a little bit more visibility in the passes. I also personally, as like a personal philosophy, don't like to rely on a lot of the in-game elements as a reason for making passes. So like if you're in my blind spot and there's a radar element coming up, but I still can't see you, like I should be aware of you, but you're still not alongside me enough, things of that nature. Right. So treat some of these with a grain of salt, because like I was talking to another league owner a couple of weeks ago, and like their biggest thing on overlap was axle to axle rather than door to door. It was like front axle to rear axle. I don't agree with that, because front axle to rear axle means the car in front can't see you, things like that. So just put an asterisk next to a lot of this. If you go to SRA or if you go to other places, they'll probably disagree, but you're still going to need to have some overlap somewhere if you're going to make a pass happen. And you still need to have appropriate overlap somewhere if you're going to protest a pass. The more overlap you have, the easier it is to discuss and protest if you are getting protested, right? So we've all seen this, right? We've all seen the joke all the time. You have to leave the space, right? But why is it important? Proper racing is about 2 or more cars being able to negotiate safely without killing each other, right? The car that's passing needs to be able to have enough space and not kill the guy in front. But also the car being passed also has to leave space so that they don't get killed. And, we'll talk about some of the scenarios where like the car that's being passed needs to know to negotiate, but a large part of the responsibility is always going to be on the passing car, because they are entering the engagement. So there needs to be adequate space. They need to have found the right place on the racetrack. They need to kind of set the presentation before they get started. So there's not a lot for the car being passed to do, except for like not squeezing them off the road and not killing them. And when we get into how to defend, we'll talk about a few things that the car in front needs to do to kind of meet some rules of engagement. But, a large amount of this is going to be the responsibility on the passing car to make sure that they're able to negotiate in safely to start the discussion. And then it's up to the two of you guys to not be assholes and not kill each other.
Most real racing is mirror.
Yeah. Yeah, so that works out about the same because
SCCA.
yeah, that works out about the same because it's picture right here. Right, yeah, because mirror to mirror, exactly why, right? Like if we did axle to axle in real cars, you'd wreck a lot of cars, and that would suck. Right? So mirror to mirror is easy because then I can see you. Right? If like the photo on the left, I call it not enough overlap. Right? Yeah, okay, I know a car is there. Yeah, I know he's kind of in that little blind spot. The car in front can't see me, so I'm gonna more likely drive into his rear fender. Right? Shot on the right, more mirror to mirror. Right? We're negotiating equally together. It's easier for the car that's being passed to see this big old pink car. And now we have to negotiate together to both make it through the corner. And, it's better. It's just better. Just.
So in the not enough overlap example, can the top car turn in with negligence in terms of the corner because he has kind of ownership?
Well, I mean, do you want to wreck a car?
No, I'm just curious, is it the responsibility of the bottom car to back off at that point?
That's going to largely come down to the type of incident and the steward that's stewarding you, right? I will say that practicality will normally trump idealism in those sort of situations. So a large part of it will depend on the guy you're racing and how that interchange is happening, right? If the guy up front is coming in at warp factor 9 and just isn't going to make the corner, then it doesn't make sense to turn in even though I had the right to, because he's going to hit me no matter what, right? Where if we're moving more slowly and I can negotiate it, I'm probably going to turn in because that bump's not going to be that bad.
This is very much a kind of sim racing question. In real life, you just if you suspect there is a car there, you don't turn in. You leave the space because you don't want to be in a wall with a $500,000 bill to pay for your broken car,
or even just a club car that I just spent my time on. Shit, I have a club car in my garage. I don't want someone driving into it. That sucks, right? But Ilpo's right. One of the frustrating parts about sim racing sometimes is that if you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile. And so if you don't turn in because you want to be nice, they'll just kind of drive right off the inside. And so you have to play these games in order to deter them from even doing it. Right? The whole purpose of this discussion. But yeah, in a real car, if I think you might be there, I'm not going to take the risk. I'm just going to, turn in from the outside lane and sit in the middle of the road. Because there's still room in a lot of corners where I can take up half the racetrack and give you ample room to maneuver, but I'm removing your line choices on exit without really hampering myself that much, right? I don't have to go to the apex. I don't have to go through the corner at full speed, right? There's no rule in the rule book that says that all drivers must be on the ideal racing line at all times, going maximum speed at all times. It does not exist.
So basically, you're saying the gentlemanly thing would be to leave just enough room for him, but make it difficult enough where he thinks that the exit's not going to be advantageous.
Right, exactly. It's going to screw us both, but I'll still be in front. Right.
Also, it's so overlap is also a little bit of a time question, not just a space question. If this minimal amount of, I don't know, it's not even axle to axle. If this happens right at the end of the braking zone, just before you turn the wheel, nobody would expect you to leave the space because you don't know he's there. You are not looking at your mirror halfway through the braking zone to see if someone is diving you. If it happens right at the start of the braking and the cars maintain this relation through the whole braking zone, you probably should be aware that there is someone there, even if it's not fully alongside. I think Jimmy Broadbent talks about this. He made a video about there was a Nürburgring lap or something where he was commenting on the passes. It's very kind of good learning on how the real life drivers think about overlap and space. I highly recommend watching it.
Yeah, no, I've seen that one. That's really good. Right. A lot of this also does come down to experience, right? So it's a little bit easier to make the call when you've raced a lot because you kind of know the outcome of a lot of these things. And so when you've done a lot of laps and you see someone doing a certain move, you can just kind of visualize or anticipate what the outcome's going to be and make your choice based on that. Right. There are some folks that I just know, Turn 2 at Brands is a perfect example, right? If I give them an inch of an opening, even just because I'm off the line, they're going to drive their car right up the inside of my door every single time. And so I just drive to the outside line because they don't know and it sucks, but here we are, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I've done so many races around brands, and I've been hit there so many times that I can see it coming. I've seen enough of a pattern that I kind of can predict it, and I have a plan to get around it. Right? It's not fun because we're both slow, and it's not fun because now he's driving into my rear fender half the time. But at least I'm not in the wall. Right? You see a lot of new folks when they haven't been racing a lot. They still are kind of stuck with it. There's only one line. And so they're in a situation like in the first shot, and they still try to go all the way to the apex. And they cross over in front of the car in front of them and spin themselves out. Right? Yeah, sure, you could probably blame the car that's trying to do the pass, but also practicality beats out idealism. So do I want to get my car wrecked? No. So let's maneuver in a space that keeps my car safe, deal with it somewhere else. All right. So there's this concept about the vortex of danger, and I've been trying to think of a good way to explain this. In my mind, the way that I explain the vortex of danger is when a passing car puts themselves into a position that they are going to have a collision with the car that they are trying to pass when they can't see them. So in a lot of cases, it is after the car ahead has started to turn into for a corner and their vision is looking down track. They are no longer looking for you or trying to position for you. So, you know, and we kind of all know where that is. Like as we start to get off the brakes and the car starts to turn, we don't think about what's behind us anymore. We think about hitting the apex and getting the road in front. So if you are trying to save your passing to the very, very last minute, you often find yourself in this entry vortex of danger where like basically you're in the lead car's blind spot, you know, physically and also a little bit emotionally. Right. And so you think that there's room for you to get there, and there may be, but based on the time that you have, there's not enough time for you to get up next to the car that you're trying to pass in a way that they can adjust their line anymore to make sure we don't collide. So it's too late and you crash and you die. Right. We've all been that guy, and we've all also been hit by that guy. It's very frustrating. The exit vortex can be the same thing. And you see this a lot, like when you get rear snapped into the wall, right? So you're behind a passing car. You don't have enough overlap next to them as you're going through the corner where you're sitting on their rear axle. They are turning into the corner and they're looking to track out. They just cannot see you. It's just impossible, right? And so they go to track out and the rear of their car snaps over the front of yours and that car ends up into the wall, right? That's also because the car behind is putting themselves in an exit vortex of danger where just the lead car just doesn't even know that they're there because they don't have eyes behind them. They're not going to look behind them, right? I see it a lot when people are playing like F1 2023 or whatever, where they're constantly hitting the A button so they can see if a car's getting a run on them. Like, first of all, it's nauseating, but also it's just not realistic. You know, for me...
Oh, you mean look back?
Yeah, look back. Yeah, just constantly hitting A. It drives me crazy. You know, one of the things that I will do when I'm racing cars is if I can't see them in my rearview mirror, like if I can't see their front bumper in my rearview mirror, I somewhat assume that they are in a blind spot, and I will give them as much room as I think is necessary. Right. So if we're let's say going through turn 3 at brands, because for some reason I have Brands Hatch in my mind right now. Right. There are people who sometimes will sit on the outside as you're turning in and like try to drive around on the grass. And so as I turn in, I'll look in my rear view to see if I see them. And if I can't see them, I don't track all the way out because there's a good chance that their rear bumper, their front bumper is where my rear bumper is, and they snap you up into the field up the hill. Right? That's just because I've done a lot of laps at brands and I've been wrecked a lot up there because people are still trying to make a pass happen when like we're not on the exit yet. We're not going straight yet. They're trying to pass me in the middle of the corner in that yellow zone box we talked about a little while ago. And I don't know that they're there. So practicality beats out idealism, and I give them a little bit of room. It sucks because now we're both really slow, but it's better than being wrecked. But you see a lot of people who just are going for it, and they put themselves in these vortexes of danger. So if the TLDR of this is, you know, really try to anticipate the path of the car in front of you of where they're going, and don't put yourself where they're going to go so that you don't die.
Don't go into the closing gap.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also add to this. It's not just the vortex of danger is not just about the driver in front being aware of where you are. They also, once they commit to the corner, they may not be able to change their line. It's less of a thing in a GT3 car because it has very good brakes, lots of aero, everything. But especially if you drive a lot in the GT4s or even the M2 and some other low grip cars, usually once you are committed to your line, you cannot tighten it. Like you can't touch the brakes mid corner to tighten the line. That will just snap the car or understeer even more. Even if you lift on the exit, you might still track out and run the other guy to the wall. So going into these gaps once the car in front is fully committed is just suicide.
I mean, try it for fun. Like try.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just saying the image to the left completely just answers the question that was done in the prior image in the last slide.
Yeah, it does. You know, there's a lot of it depends with the situation, but yes. But you know, try it next time you're on HOP, right? Get some laps in under your belt. Go into your favorite corner. Doesn't matter which is. In the middle of it, try to change it. Just try to change your line in the middle. See how well that goes. Right? Imagine that's the car you're trying to pass. Sucks just as bad. Physics still applies the same way. So if you can anticipate those sorts of things, it'll save you a lot. Also, this is why often I tell you, like, let the car in front finish doing what it's doing. Because if you let the car that's moving slow make all the way to the exit, then you can safely drive by. Right? There's no need to beat them to the corner if their line was already shit. Right? Because they've already committed the sin. Let them finish. Right? Don't be so excited that you have to try to get by them immediately. Let them make it easier for you, which can take a lot of patience, right? But a lot of folks create their own vortex of danger by not paying attention to the surroundings, right? They get very desperate about just trying to make a pass whenever possible. They don't think about the outcomes of what can happen to them. They just drive into a death spiral and then they crash. So try not to do that. All right. So I wanted to do this real quick because I don't think a lot of people have done this themselves. Often, like when I'm battling cars or when I go back through replays, I will sit in the car that I'm battling and see, could they see me? So this is that screenshot from the images a couple shots back, a couple slides back, right? The car on the left is the car that is being passed. The car on the right is the car that's passing. So the leading car can't see behind him, especially in this case because there's not sufficient overlap. So he does not know how much he needs to adjust to avoid a collision because the car that is passing him has not made himself enough made him visible enough to give him that information. It is impossible. Right? Unless he just wants to blow the corner completely, which still might not be enough because we don't know. It's going to be very, very, very hard and not very likely that he will be able to save you from this crash. However, the chasing car can see all the information. This is what don't hit what you can see comes from, right? You can see your own position and where you are. You can see your opponent's car and his position. You can see the corner in front of you, and you can see what everyone is doing. So you have more data to adjust and adapt to what is happening. You can see the entire field of battle, but the car that's being passed can only see their point of view.
And just to reiterate too, this is generally the first person driving position, not up on the dashboard.
Yeah, good point. Yep. Or like in the roof or chase cam or any of those other bullshit cameras, right? Like I'm thinking of just from the driver's point of view. A lot of times, like if you're driving with someone on House of Practice that you were trying to battle with, or you have a battle buddy, spend some time in their car and just look at their point of view when you're up next to them and moving next to them and see if you can see your own car. Because that'll help you kind of determine like how early do I need to be alongside? How far up the straightaway do I need to be? Right? Like other things like that to get that timing down appropriately. Right? Often in situations like this, if there was a crash, the guy doesn't mean to. He doesn't. He's just trying to turn into the corner like a normal person. And here you are coming up warp factor 10 on the wrong line and he doesn't know what to do. And so there's a crash. Where if you can put yourself in the shoes of the other guy you're passing, that's where the whole SAD acronym comes from, right? Don't be selfish, be aware, right? If you can put yourself in the shoes of the other guy, then it'll make it easier to kind of determine whether a pass is really even on or not, right? Because you can be like, hey man, you can see me, right? If you're drag racing with a guy down a straightaway where you are neck and neck, it is way easier to be like, dude, bro, what's happening here? Versus a last minute peak where he can't see you. Sucks. So be mindful of what your opponent can see. And that'll help you determine whether a pass should even start or not.
Quick question, sorry.
Yo, what's up?
So, sorry, can I go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
So in this case, I think there is enough overlap where at least in ACC you would see them on the radar, right? And you would see it there alongside the radar.
But they're not.
Does that change?
But they're not. But they're not here. So like know, there's a car around you, but we're racing cars, so there's always cars around you. But there's not enough overlap here to really negotiate a proper pass, right? It's like a parking sensor, right? Treat it like a parking sensor. He's probably going to touch you. That's, be aware of those things. If he does make a dive here, it's going to probably be a bit of a bump, right? So if you see him at the last minute as you turn in, be prepared for that. But there's not enough overlap to dictate an appropriate rule of engagement. Like, you haven't engaged me properly here. You're just behind me. Equivalent like the blind spot sensors on an SUV, right? Just beep, but still, like, shit, don't go. Things like that. This is about as much overlap as you may need in a lot of cases. Enough to be visible, right? Like, you don't need to have the whole car. You don't need to see the rear fender. You don't need to see, but it does need to be enough that you can, hey man, don't turn. Right? Because he needs to be able to negotiate this, right? At this point, he's got a lot of choices he can make. He could break in a straight line and let me continue this thing. He can try to go around the outside of me if he feels like he can commit to it early enough. Sometimes the pass is just done, and it's just better to not fight back because you just got passed. And it's cheaper and faster to just let the pass be over and slip right back on the racing line. Again, anytime you're not on the optimal line, losing time. So when you see people going too wide for corner after corner after corner, yeah, it's really exciting, but it's slow as shit. So when I'm following cars like this, I love watching them go too wide because they're slow. It's fresh meat. It's blood in the water, right? They're going slower. I need them to go slower because I'm trying to pass those two, right? So where you can, try to just let passes be as seamless as possible. Get right back on the racing line and get right back up to speed, because the more you spend tickling around with each other, the more vulnerable you'll be to the cars behind, or the more likely the car in front of you will drive away if you're not fighting for the lead of the race. So same thing when looking at the big picture of like working with in-laps and out-laps, when you're working with overall net race time. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but like there are certain times where I don't want to battle anyone on like an out-lap when I need the time difference. Like I need to have a good delta to pass a car that's going to be sitting in the pit soon, right? So trying to making sure that I pit in a place that I can exit in open traffic so I'm not driving too wide with people. And in some cases, maybe not even passing them for a little bit so that I just lose as little time as possible until we get past the pit exit. And then I'll pass that car, right? Because now I've got track positioning so I can get by them, right? It's super, super critical. So even though it's really exciting and it's a lot of fun and I like to do it too, sometimes there's a penalty for that sort of stuff, right? There's a detriment for doing it. So you've got to be mindful of like, is it worth battling this car here for the time loss that I'm going to incur because of it? Sometimes yes, but most of the time no.
If you ever do endurance racing, it's even more of a thing, because for the you're not gonna defend someone for 12 hours straight. So track position is not very valuable early in the race, especially since we don't have safety cars and all the other yellow flags, whatever. Your goal for most of an endurance race is to optimize your lap time. You don't care about track position. All you need is to drive as fast as possible. It's only in the last couple of hours when you realistically could hold someone off for the whole remaining race, when you want to start getting more defensive. Most of the time, there are special cases, obviously. Like if you're on the wrong tires, they are on the right tires, you want to screw them as much as possible, sure.
Yep.
And by the way, this also applies to situations where the field is mixed because some of the cars have not pitted yet. While technically you might be on the same lap, so technically you're allowed to fight them, it is not very useful for either of you, because you're not going to be ahead of them after you pit when you still need to do a pit stop. And they're going to be very angry for you holding them up.
Yep. So, it's something to be mindful of, right? Like, again, I know I'm talking a lot, so try to take key points away. Anytime that you're not on the optimal racing line, you're going slower than you could be, right? If you were driving alone doing a lap by yourself and you were on a shit line, it'd be slow. You have to be on a shit line most of the time to pass people. So you're going to be slower than you would be if you're driving alone. just the nature of the beast. So you need to weigh up the risk. Is it worth losing time? Is it worth the risk of car-to-car contact? But mostly, is it worth losing time, right? Not only do the cars around you immediately, but the cars that are around you in the big picture. Because the objective is to try to get to the finish line as soon as possible. So anything that you're doing that deters you from that goal is kind of less than ideal. Alrighty, we kind of pinned on this, but I do need to bring this up, right? Like, given a racing room is the responsibility of both drivers once appropriate overlap has been established, right? So once I know you're there, I shouldn't be trying to screw you unnecessarily, right? We both need enough room to survive through the corner. I'm trying to remove some line choices from you. You're trying to remove some line choices from me. That is equally understood because we are going racing. But I shouldn't be trying to like pinch you off. I shouldn't be trying to drive you off the track. I shouldn't be trying to like screw you over. Later we'll kind of get to a little bit of sportsmanship and karma because of it, but also like you have to think of your own race, right? Does it make sense to get driven into if you're trying to get to the end with a clean car? Here, braking performance is key for overtaking under the brakes. So every car in ACC kind of has a differing level of braking performance to some degree, the way they brake, how they brake. So we want to be aware of that. But also where we're braking on the racetrack is also super important of where we brake. So, you know, just going deeper doesn't work, right? If that was the case, then why did we have a breakpoint to begin with? There's a reason why breakpoints even exist, and that is the last place that you can be on the brakes to make the corner. So a lot of people suck at passing because they just miss the corner. Basically, they just miss the breakpoint, miss the corner, and they drive right in, right? In their mind, they're like, "Oh, I'm just braking later than the guy in front," but that doesn't make any sense because that's not how cars work. Right, so they just miss the corner and they hit the car in front, and then they don't look back over it ever again, and they just kind of move on. Right, so you want to be mindful of where you're braking. Often, if you're passing a car, you're going to have to brake earlier first to get that initial deceleration done, and then use some of that momentum to get up alongside them and near them, so that you can get the overlap to maneuver with them. Right, but braking late, you've run out of room and space to be able to do that, and you know the equivalent of braking late, if you're doing it appropriately, should be as late as you can to the qualifying breakpoint without going by it, right? So if I'm offline and I'm braking at the 150, and the 150 is where you brake online, that is really late already. I'm already going to miss the corner by a little bit, right? So that lateness will vary based on where your line is and where you brake, and then that will help you kind of determine where you need to be braking, how late is late, things like that. Does that make sense for folks?
Yeah.
I apologize. I have to bounce. I got a race coming up in a few minutes, so
Good
I
luck.
appreciate it though, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything. Yeah. So yeah, I'll definitely attend the next one as well.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Somebody have a question in the meantime?
Yeah, I have a question about the breaking point.
Yeah.
So our breaking markers. So
Yeah.
as you said that it's the breaking point or breaking marker is the very last point on the track at which you can get on the brakes. So in terms of race pace, is it okay to be braking a little, I would say, before that or should you always work on consistency of braking at that exact point?
Oh, good question. So it's going to vary based on like fuel load and weight and other things, right? Like the heavier the car, the more room it's going to need to slow down. So that brake point will come back a bit. Especially when you are following cars, right? RS has a fantastic video about this. But whenever you're following cars, your brake point is always earlier because the car in front of you has to brake. And so you have to brake earlier so that you can be slowed down so that you're not moving more quickly and running into the back of the car in front of you because you haven't braked yet.
That's also what we call adjusting for the other driver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the physics say that because the distance in time, if you're driving identically between the cars, is going to stay same. But when speed decreases, the distance in the physical distance will decrease because you're moving slower. So the distance the car covers in the same amount of time is smaller. And eventually that distance will be less than the length of the car, which means your front bumper is now inside the rear bumper of the car in front, and that driver is very mad.
Yep.
But also when you are too wide into a corner, you're almost certainly both are going to have to brake early because neither of the drivers can take the optimal line.
Yep.
And there are some tricky things like racing to the apex, where you brake super duper late and you get fully past the other car to the apex, and then you just park the car there. But that's like, there are very few corners where it can work, and it's also very difficult to do cleanly. So let's not get into that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't include a lot of like the getting to the apex and parking it and a lot of those concepts here because they are more sophisticated and also case by case, right? Unfortunately, racing is one of those things that takes a ton of time to explain for very small segments in time. And, at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to come down to race experience, right? So as you start to battle more cars, when you're racing another car, you'll brake a little early to give yourself a little bit of room because you're going to need a little bit of room to negotiate with this guy. He's going to brake a little bit early so he doesn't really drive into you. You'll both kind of negotiate with each other as you're making your way through the corner, and then whoever's pretty much leading at the apex will be leading on the way out. Right. So,
yeah, I was gonna say that we can explain all of these things to you, but that's not worth the same as just
doing it,
actually practicing it.
Yeah.
Because when you are in the situation, you don't have the time to remember what did Davin say about this particular case.
Yeah. Was I supposed to break? Oh shit! Right. That's why a house of practice can be so valuable if used effectively. Right. So I'll put it to you like this: my first race isn't on Thursday. It is on the Monday before, right? I'm battling people all week, chasing them around, trying different break points, trying different spots, trying different lines, moving around. So by the time I get to the race, I've pretty much run through the whole playbook of different things I want to try. That way it's easier for me to kind of know when I want to do something or not and be decisive about it, rather than just kind of, I don't know, right? And I don't need to be trying to set a fast lap time all week to practice those things. There's people all throughout the speed range I can work with. There's fast guys that I can defend against. There's slow people that I know I'm going to chase. And at the end of the day, I got to race them. So I got to practice racing them. So driving with them to race them should be the objective, right? A lot of folks get really wound up about the ego of the lap time, so they don't think about racing. And so they spend all their time in qualifying, and the qualifying sessions we have are quite close because you've practiced qualifying a ton. And then the race is a complete disaster because nobody practiced racing other people except for the people who are like the top 6 and they all drove away, right? So you really got to just get the seat time in and try racing other cars. It's, you could spend the rest of your life sitting here listening to clinics, listening to me talk about racing, and if you don't ever practice it, you're never going to be good at it. So this is just like background context of like conceptual theories of things to think about. Like the next time you hit a car, come back here and we'll talk about it, right? Okay. Any questions? I got one other segment I got to go through. Oh, good. No, okay.
I might add to what we were just discussing about coming back to this to review later. Also review your own overtakes and attempts and defenses and everything after the race. That's how you learn. Like, look at it from the other driver's perspective and from the third party and third person camera and whatever, because we have all these super tools that real life drivers don't, and figure out like, could I have done something better? What worked well? Because that's kind of the way humans learn, is it's kind of a feedback loop, or you do something and then you go review it and you go like, okay, next time I'm going to do this and that differently. Or you go like, oh, that was really good. I need to remember that next time. That's what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. And not just like, cool, man, I did it, but like, why did that work? Or why didn't that work?
So if you watch some of the pretty good streamers like Jadier, he's reviewing a lot of stuff after race. Like he reviews his incidents to learn something from them. He reviews some of his overtakes. He reviews when he got overtaken by someone, because he's always trying to improve. He's always trying to see like, what can I do better? Always learning.
Yep. That learning mindset is super, super important, right? It's also kind of the thing that I notice that prevents a lot of drivers from going faster, because they get their ego too tied into what they think we care about when we don't. Like, I really don't care that your line is shit. I really don't care that you are slow. I want to help you get faster. So you not utilizing your tools only hurts yourself, because there's a lot of people who are available to help you or explain things or practice with you or whatnot, and you not taking advantage of those tools is only to your own detriment when the other person knows what they're doing. Right? Like, I worked with Michael yesterday trying to figure out some time at Power Card. I think I found like 7/10 or 8/10 at Power Card yesterday. Mike already knows how to go fast. Dude's almost doing 52s. Right? It doesn't help me to not talk to him because he knows what to do and I don't. So I ask him, and I'm like, dude, why does this suck so bad? And he follows me around and he says, oh, your shit here, fix this here, try this here, do this here. And I was like, that's too many things. And I picked one or two things and I worked on those one or two things, right? But if you don't self-analyze and always try to focus on learning something, you're never going to get better. You're just going to spend your time in a limbo of kind of mediocrity driving around, and other people will get faster and you'll think they're aliens when they're really not. Right? They're just educating themselves. Like, there are true aliens, but a lot of folks are just practicing and learning. All right, last thing, because I want to give you some time to drive and talk about some other things. Defense. Okay, so defense is an interesting concept because before we get into these slides, I have a question. Who here thinks that a defensive line looks special?
By special, do you mean like
different,
off?
like unique?
I would say on entry into a corner, I believe it'd be different.
Is it special though?
Not necessarily.
That's a good answer. That's a very good answer.
I think the best defense is driving fast.
Yeah, the best defense is driving fast, but sometimes you can't. Or the car around you is faster than you, or has lighter fuel than you, or sometimes it's Bob's better than you, right? So sometimes you can't be faster, or the driver's just better than you, right? So what happens then? So you need to figure out how to deal with that until you can get away or give yourself some space or let the other guy slow him down or something else. All right. So let's talk about defense real quick, and then I think we'll be done for a minute. So defense is about preemptive positioning, right? And all we're really doing when we're defending is we're protecting the inside of the corner as much as possible without deterring our speed, right? So again, we're trying to remove our opponent's options without reducing as many of ours. Right. So Jacob's point is very valid. Speed is your best defense. If you could just drive fast, you don't need to defend against anybody because you can just get away from them. But there are a ton of situations where even if you are driving as fast as you possibly can go, there will be a faster car or a car of a similar pace, or you will be prevented from going fast because there's a car in front of you that is stopping you from going your ultimate pace. So, we need to know kind of how to defend appropriately until we're able to get out of here.
Traffic, that kind of thing.
Traffic, yeah, an opponent, like whatever, right? Like, there's a lot of things that can slow you down. Now, let's first talk about the things you can't do. Like, you're not allowed to do these, like bad driving and also rule breaking, right? You're not allowed to weave under braking, right? Especially when we start talking about Vortex of Danger and having suitable space and all these other things. It's a safety thing, right? You're going into a corner, you're going to brake, you want to be braking in a straight line, you need to be focused on the corner ahead, you need to be taking a predictable arc so that cars around you know where you're going. If you're on the brakes and like swerving to cut some car off before the turn-in, that's bad, right? This is not turning. This is like prior to rotation of the car into the corner sort of stuff, right? Don't do that. Weaving to change direction, same thing, right? So if we're going into a right-hand corner and I'm on the outside of you, you can make a choice to, enter from 2/3 of the way in to defend against me, but you can't come back to the outside to block me after that. Don't do that, right? Reacting to the car behind them. So if we're going into a corner and I sell you a dummy, right? So I move to the inside and then you move to defend against me and then I move to the outside to get back on the racing line before we turn, which is a valid move for the car behind to do. When you're in a corner, the leading car can't change direction. The car behind, as long as there's no car within range of them, can, right? I'm allowed to do that. You can't then come back to get in front of me. Once you've made your choice, you've made your choice. So a good driver knows how much room to give up to get the outcome they want and no more. So I might go a quarter of the way in to turn in from there because it's enough to defend from you, but I still have enough road on the room of the road to carry decent cornering speed. If I drive all the way to the bottom of the corner, you get nothing. Right? If you guys get a chance, watch today's U.S. Grand Prix with Hamilton and Norris. Perfect example of that. So they're going into turn one. Norris is leading Hamilton. He's going to get past anyway, so he's just trying something, right? And as they get to the turn one, Norris goes right to the bottom of the corner, and Hamilton goes right back to the racing line on the outside and goes right underneath him, right? Norris is trying to use track position to slow down Hamilton, but Hamilton's got a lot more experience, so he just goes back to the racing line, lets this car get slow at the bottom of the corner because he's got to turn a lot, and just drives right by him. Right? But it's a defensive thing that by trying to stop Hamilton from overtaking him under brakes, he screwed his exit up and got passed anyway. So a little more experience, maybe he doesn't make that move as early. Maybe he only moves a little bit less, right? There's some things he can do. There's some things he can't do. Like some of it's tire difference, like blah, 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 blah. But in this situation, the positioning is what's important.
Or just get a Red Bull.
Yeah, or just get a Red Bull. Oh. All right, so back to my other question. Example of a defensive line, right? A defensive line looks very similar to any suboptimal line because that's exactly what it is, right? We are just using our car's positioning to prevent a faster car from passing me with the momentum that they have, right? That means putting my car in the way and doing certain things within the rules to delay the momentum of the car behind, right? That could be delaying when I get on the throttle. Slow exits. That's a strategic choice. That could be where I turn in, car positioning, and how I accelerate out. But like defensive lines don't look magic. They're just strategically used suboptimal lines to stop your opponent. Back to the earlier slides that we talked about the reasons why people can't pass. Right? Often when you're at the novice end of passing, if you're following a car that's running a defensive line too closely, you just end up driving the same speed as that defensive car, and you just sit there frustrated because you're not utilizing any of the momentum that you had to catch them anymore. You're just constrained by the car in front. So when you race somebody with more experience, they laugh at you when they do this shit because they know where the racing line is and they know what you're trying to do, and they're like, I'll just wait, right? You'll see them back off a little bit. And just kind of, it's like Jaws, right? They're just down. You take this really kind of weak ass line to try to defend, and they accelerate right by, right? In multi-car situations where you're in a train, you can use the defensive line a lot more effectively because most of the time, most cars are still not quite on the optimal line, or they're being constrained by a slower car up front or something else like that. So you use that defensive line to deter cars behind you from not seeing an invitation to try to make a pass. Right. So there are some psychological benefits from using the defensive line of like, hey, man, don't put your car in there. Right. Because folks will do that. If you sometimes sit on certain corners that have very wide entries, for example, they'll just put their car in on the inside because they're trying to pass. And if they can get by, they're going to get by. So you have to then take a crappy line on purpose to say, hey, man, stop that. Right. If we do this too many times, we will get dropped by the cars in front of us. So I don't want to be doing that corner after corner after corner after corner after corner, which means I would prefer it if the car behind me wasn't trying to attack me crappily corner after corner after corner after corner after corner, because we are both sabotaging ourselves. And then when we do figure our shit out, no matter who is leading, we'll be so far away from the cars in front, then what was the point of showing up today? So, part of, as you work your way up through higher disciplines of racing, will be, kind of the skill level of the drivers around and if they're thinking about the big picture or not, right? Like, shit, sometimes I'll be battling a guy and yeah, I just want to get by him because I just want to pass him because I just like passing that guy. Like, sure, okay, fine, whatever. But if I'm trying to win the race, I need to think about what actions are preventing me from winning the whole race, not just this little battle. I want to win the war. I don't want to win the battle.
And I got a question.
Yo.
So in regards to overlap, using this like image as an example, like what's the minimum amount of space like on the inside that you have to leave when there's curbing? Like, can you leave enough room that the car would legally be on the track, but force the other person to have to ride the curbs in order to like gain time or slow his car down?
You could leave 99% of a car.
Well, so the by the rules answer is it depends on the league you are racing in.
Oh,
so make certain you understand the rules of the league you are racing in.
That's also true. It's a good, better answer.
In NASRS, you can expect them to take the normal amount of curving. So, for example, in this corner, you don't ride the curb because it's very bumpy. So you can't force someone to ride the curb. I think technically the rule says that you cannot force them over a curb that would risk them losing control of their car.
Yeah,
So
that's right. Yeah.
Right, so you can't force them on this curb because this curb is scary when you try to run over it. You can't force them over a sausage curb because that would also be a death sentence. But let's say, what's a good example? Like the inside curbings in something like Valencia. Sure, you can expect them to go very tight over the curbing. But also, trying to control the space of the inside car as the outside car is dangerous, because if there is a collision, guess who's going to be the one who dies?
The one taking the pit maneuver.
Well, I mean, in every single location, it's usually the car on the outside.
Right,
Because
that's the one taking the pit.
well, it's not necessarily a pit maneuver. You could be fully side by side and just hit side by side, but it's still more likely for the outside car to die. It doesn't always happen, but it is more likely that way. So don't try to force them too much, because it is dangerous.
Yeah, typically for me, the farther away the car is from me, the less tight I'll take the corner, because I don't need to deter them from doing something silly. If they're really, really close to me, I'm going to be really tight. To basically be like, hey, jackass, don't stop. Right? Because they need some visual marker that says there is no space to go here. Do not enter this realm. Right? So
this goes back to learning the guy that you're driving around also.
Yep. Because
pay attention to what he's trying to tell you. We don't have enough room for this. You and I can roll together. We'll get up to the next guy ahead, and we can work together rather than you trying to beat the piss out of me every time I slow down.
Right. Exactly. So some folks know this better than others. Some folks are very, very fast, and they can drive the line exceptionally fast. But then when they get around another car, they have no idea how to wait for 5 seconds, and they just run into you all the time. That can be somewhat very frustrating. I'm going to leave this for another day, but there are some rare occasions when sometimes it is better to let that person go, because they'll kill somebody else rather than kill you. And so sometimes you can think about winning the war by letting somebody else do the murder. Right? But most of the time, I don't want that.
Fight your battle.
Yeah. Oh no, man. I've had several races where the guy I'm racing just, we're not going to get along. It's just not going to work out that well, right? And it's early enough in the race that he's going to catch the guy in front and going to drive that guy the same way he was driving me. You know what? I'll make my pass another way, right? They just smash each other off the road, and I get 2 spots for the price of 1, and everything's golden again, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to deal with all this stress if I'm not going to be able to get away from this guy, because he's just going to eventually kill me, and I don't want that. I want to win the race.
You just gave my comment.
Yeah, there you go. Mind reader. All right, I think we're done. Almost done here. Okay, defense, controlling your pace. So this is something that we kind of covered a little bit, but I see a lot of people getting confused by this. So I'm going to go over this again. So there's no rule in the NASRS rulebook and most other rulebooks I've read that says that a car has to go through every corner on the optimal racing line, or do they have to go as fast as possible? So in situations where you can't get away, right? You've worn out your rear tires. The setup in the car is shit. Car is behind you is tremendously faster than you. Whatever. There's a million different reasons why, right? It is acceptable to control the pace of the cars around you within reason, right? As long as you're not breaking the rules we talked about earlier, right? If a faster car doesn't notice that change in pace, that is their own fault. So if you're just stuck in a train for a really, 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 really long time and you haven't looked around to just notice that the lap time is 0.8 of a second off the pace, that's your own fault. That's you losing your own race, right? So there are ways to actively defend where you can slow the car down, and kind of there's not a lot that the car behind can do about it because of timing as well. And so, there are ways to gradually apply the throttle exiting the corner and other more sophisticated things that aren't just these massive checkups of speed that are just slow enough that the car behind you can't get a run in the next corner, or other things like that are totally valid, right? You are sacrificing speed for track position though. So you have to be willing to make that deal with the devil early, because the car behind isn't going to get away. Right, you're not going to pull away from them doing this. You are keeping them close, and you are cuddling, and they are going to be near you and at risk of touching you. So you need to be comfortable with that proximity for a while, right? There are some drivers where you can keep them behind you to a spot where they will make their own mistake and kill themselves, but it is more likely they may kill you. So you have to have good car control and be very deliberate in what you are doing so that you don't put your car in a unnecessarily big risk, right? Two examples that I think of that are F1 examples because they're easy to find and look up are Lewis Hamilton in Abu Dhabi in 2016 and Carlos Sainz this year in the Singaporean Grand Prix. Both examples where the fastest car didn't win the race, right? Hamilton's was more strategic because he was trying to back his opponent into opponents behind him, which is a valid strategy, right? If I've got a guy that's trying to race me, but I know that there's guys that are trying to race him and they are close enough that I can back him up and then pull away, I'm going to do that. Because I'm just trying to get there as soon as possible with the least amount of interference. I do not need to go qualifying flat out speed from the very beginning to the very end of the race. I just need to get to the finish line first. So whatever tools I can use to create that objective, I'm going to use. So if that means the guy in third could help me by getting the guy in second in front of him, I'm going to do that. Especially if it's a track that I know well, that I can manage the pace down slow enough that we can get the cars back together again until I can get away. The Singaporean Grand Prix example is more of a matter of just teamwork, right? So I think of examples like Rainey and I had a race at Zandvoort that worked this way. We were racing in the rookie cars just for shits and giggles, and I think we qualified like 12th and 13th or something like that, and we finished 5th and 6th because we just paired up and didn't fight each other the entire time. So whenever I got to him, I just sat there. We kind of ran together. If one of us made a big mistake and missed the corner, then the other car would go by. But we didn't fight each other unnecessarily. And then when we caught other cars in front of us, we let one guy open the door and the other guy slid in behind them. And so we passed cars as a pair. And so it made it easier for us to make progress, which was the overall objective. And we only attacked each other when somebody messed up. Until we got to like the last 2 laps of the race, and then it's all gloves are off, right? We've had our little gentleman's agreement. We did whatever we needed to do. We are as far forward as we can humanly be. Now I just need to be in front of him, right? But we worked together to minimize time loss as much as possible until we got to a point where we could actually fight. So
that's NASCAR racing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't see that much in ACC, but you see it in other like NASCAR games.
That's a great example. Yeah, you see that in real life NASCAR all the time. It's a great example, right? Where 2 cars are faster than one. It's a perfect example. Yep. So you find a buddy, you pair up with a buddy, you buddy with that car for 90% of the race, and then the last 10 laps, it's like, well, good luck. Like, thanks for the help, right? That's why it's also useful to make friends and know people, because if I'm racing someone I know, I'm more likely to work with them. If I don't know you, or if you've been a dick to me, I am not going to be so nice to you, right? Because it just sucks. It's just karma. It's just how it works, right? Drivers have memories like elephants, right? I have a list of folks I've raced who suck to race against. And so if there's a situation where they may put themselves at risk because they're not paying attention, I will back off and let them kill themselves. Where if I'm racing a friend and I see something up front that they need to be aware of, I'm like tapping my brakes like, hey, buddy, hey, look out, right? Like if there's a place where I can give him room so we can make it through so we don't die, I'm going to do that rather than letting him stay at the bottom of the corner and running himself off the road. He's my friend. I don't want to kill him, right? I respect him. We give each other space. But if you're constantly hitting me, well, good luck to you, right? It's the same thing when you're tailgating or other, kind of attacking postures, right? If you're my friend, I will give you a half a second. I'll sit there and just we'll have a friendly little thing. If you're not my friend, I may just be filling your mirrors because I don't like you. Right? And so if you can be mindful of the space and be mindful of how you negotiate with other drivers, it will benefit you in the long run. I've had races go my way because people liked me. And they're just like, oh man, I don't want to screw Davin. Good. Right? I've also been screwed so many times because people just never respected that I was there and just ran right into me, right? So it goes both ways. But if I see somebody that's hit me more than like a few times, it starts to turn into more of a lack of respect thing. Like I know it's really I don't really know what I'm doing. I know it's more of a novice thing, but it really also boils down to like enough respect that I'm not even trying to not hit him. So, right, it ends up putting you on the naughty list. You don't want to be there. And you've got one. Like, don't lie to me and tell me you don't. Right? There's always a person that you raise that you're like, oh, it's that guy, right? Because he's run into you a ton of times because he hasn't been paying attention to a lot of the things we talk about here, and he hits you and he ruins your life.
Like,
what's up?
Today, the F1 race, after, they were on the drivers briefing, basically, the meeting after. Verstappen, Hamilton, and Norris. Like Hamilton said, like, you know, on T1, the first turn on the starting, he was like, "Oh yeah, I saw signs, but you know, like you gotta leave the space to that guy." So that was like kind of like,
yeah,
you know, like what you just thought. He's like, "Oh, I'm not racing nearby him." You know, the first turn of the race.
Right, exactly. Yes, I have a whole 2-hour race to do. I don't need to kill myself, and also I respect this guy, so I don't want to kill him.
But he just let you have space and let him pass.
Yeah, no, totally. And then you've probably also seen the same friction, like a Gasly Ocon friction, right? Where they're always running into each other, and then they're yelling at each other. Partly because they're not leaving each other enough room to do what they need to do. They're both like being selfish, and so they collide, and then they're mad because crashing sucks. So
Right.
you know, in cases where you can not crash, don't. Alrighty, I am officially done now. That is like the surface level of passing and overtaking cars. That is like the very beginning of the iceberg. But anybody have any sort of questions? Anything on their mind that they wish we talked about that we didn't?
If you don't ask now, we won't know.
Yeah, because I don't.
Davin, one thing I have a hard time with is knowing how much space I should give to the person in front so that I can attack when I sort of have an idea, okay, it's around that corner, and it's often there. Now, I think that's just a matter of, well, practice, and you're going to be practicing more.
Yeah. So, the short version of that is going to turn down to practice, right? You have to just get a lot of laps at certain corners to get a run for it. But if we're going to be clinical about it, right, you should be able to give yourself enough room that you're able to get up alongside the car you're battling with before they turn in a way that the opponent can see that you're next to them. And that last bit is kind of a really important point for me, because often you see people leaving moves really, really late. Right? And I think I skipped over a slide here. We talked about, don't defend too late, don't attack too late. Where, yeah, I mean, technically in the 0.1 second before the car actually started turning, you were next to me. But the human brain can't work that fast. Right? I can't see you adjust, like acknowledge that you're there, adjust, and come up with a different line in the next to zero amount of time you gave me. So we crash because it's just too much information and we crash. So, some of it does come to be subjective, but the big question I always ask myself when I'm going for a move is, did I give him enough time to know that I was there? If I gave him enough time to know that I was there and he turned in anyway, that's a different problem. Then I didn't give him enough time. And I tend to assume that I did not give the car in front enough time and try to find ways to give them as much time as seemingly possible rather than as little time as seemingly possible.
Another question, Peter, you need to ask yourself is, when you're setting up to pass, are you trying to help yourself on the exit side of the previous corner before the straight, where you know you're better than they are into the next corner, and you're going to do it under braking for the next corner? So there's a lot of things that it takes to get it to work right for you, as far as braking out, trying to outbrake somebody, which is difficult at best, and then trying to outrun them in the straightaway to get beside them, to get the overlap, to be able to let them know you're there, and then beat them through the corner. So there's a very long setup for most passes. And by the way, this picture actually did happen. That was a Carrera Cup race, and the guy got spun out, and the other guy drove up on him like a ramp.
Yep, totally.
I mean,
it's hilarious.
The best pass is the one where the other guy can't do anything about it.
Right.
Like as boring as they are to look at on stream or TV, the DRS passes are the best ones because the other guy has no chance. Like he's like, yeah, nothing I can do about that. So trying to surprise and beat someone, I mean, it can work, but it's a desperation move. It's not what you want to do. You want to pass the other guy so that you get so much better exit from a corner before a long straight that he's like, yeah, fuck this, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes the room that you're looking for, Peter, is in the previous corner before you are attempting the corner before you're attempting the actual pass in the next corner.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a better exit, then you have a better chance of getting beside them into the next corner, like Ilpo said, and they can't do anything about it because it's like, okay, he beat me to the next corner.
Also, when it comes to space, so there's multiple aspects, and I'm not certain which space you're actually talking about. Like, are you talking about how close do I want to follow someone? Well, the answer is it depends.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Yes.
Okay.
Again,
So
it depends, and that's what I'm saying. Probably it's practice.
So generally speaking, when I'm scoping out the opponents, I want to follow close enough to be in draft, which is most of the time like 0.7 seconds range on high speed straights, but not so close that if he does something silly like breaks stupid early to some corner or whatever, I hit them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I approach. Then if I have followed them for like a lap or two and I know what they're doing and they seem to be relatively consistent, I can get closer if I think that's helpful. But again, you don't want to be always on the bumper because then they start controlling your pace. Like they can start parking on the apex, and well, if you follow. So, and I actually wanted to talk about this. So, one thing to understand is that when you get to the more kind of advanced level, it's kind of like a game of chess.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain moves you can do to defend, and then there are those have counter moves from the attacking party. But if you use the wrong counter move, you misread the defense. You're gonna be throwing away speed and space, and the other guy might just run away from you. So it's really kind of a game where you're trying to outsmart the other guy, trying to make them pick the wrong move.
Yeah.
And understanding how close you want to follow. Again, you need to scope out the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't know anything about them, well, pick some safe distance and follow for a while.
Stranger danger, right? But if you know the guy, then you can be close. And then, the thing I tell a lot of people too is like, the closer I drive to you, the more I trust you. Because I'm assuming that you're going to break in relatively the same place, you're going to drive in relatively the same way, so I can drive in relatively the same way. If I'm following you really far back, it means I don't trust that you're going to do the right thing, and I'm going to destroy you. So I give you more room, right? The other question also comes into play is like, why? Like, where am I trying to pass this person, and why? So again, just because I can doesn't mean I should. So there are certain times where you're following a guy, and you and him are doing the same pace and speed. And unless he makes a mistake or slows down, there's no way to get close enough to him to make something happen. He's going to have to have some interference, either by his own driving or an external obstacle. So if there's no interference, I can stay kind of relatively close because we're just going to be doing the same thing. If there's going to be big interference, I want to be farther back because his change in speed is going to be big when a car in front of him slows down or there's a spin from the guy in front or whatever. And so I need the room to be able to appropriately maneuver. If I'm too close, then he just comes back into me and then I have to overslow and then we're just both sitting here. So, it kind of depends on the situation of what you're preparing for and not just like a hard and fast rule.
Hey, Peter, when you and I were running at Kyalami in the last race that we did,
yeah.
A lot of my following you was trying to determine where you were a little bit different as far as line than I was in your braking points. And at one point, I did finally get past you, but it took me several laps to really figure it out and to set it up perfectly so that when you did not really defend, but when you were slightly off your original line, as when I noticed, and I could take the advantage at that point. And it was right as we were coming down the big hill after the hairpin.
Right, yes.
So that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. You're looking for the small changes that you recognize that will make a big difference for the other driver so that you can take advantage of it, basically.
You should be able to... Oh, go ahead.
The other part of how close should I follow is how skilled are you? Because you need to not hit them when you're following. So what's your confidence in your own ability to adapt to the car in front?
Mm-hmm.
That has a huge impact how close you feel should be driving. Like, the aliens drive super duper close to each other because they trust each other not to do something silly, and they also trust themselves immensely when it comes to being able to adjust for the car in front. Now, you probably don't have all that experience, so yes, it's understandable that you probably need a little bit more distance, but you also can't leave so much distance that you can't actually attack anymore.
Well, that's where that sticker break earlier, just do it, comes from, right? Like when I'm following cars in practice, I'm intentionally giving myself the mental triggers to remind myself to brake early. And sometimes it's not braking, sometimes it's a lift, right? Like I just get off the throttle early so that the deceleration starts, and then I can actually brake a little later because I'm moving more slowly by the time I get to the corner. But I'm still getting my deceleration done earlier than the car in front, just so that I can maneuver. Right? And by practicing a lot of that, I can kind of determine which corners I really want to be doing that on and how much and how, right? Because in a lot of cases, like I don't really want to use braking as my way to slow down right away, because then it just does a bunch of things to the car to upset the weight. So I'll get off the gas, and then I'll just kind of watch the car as it gets on the brakes, and then I'll get on the brakes. And that'll give you some way to manage that.
Knowing the extremities of your car really helps too.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Would it be better to focus on learning how to more focus on the exit pass then to be safer though? Wouldn't that be it?
So I would say that's a great place to start. And the reason why is because then you have to watch the car in front of you go through the entire phase of the corner to understand where they'll end up. Right? Because if you want to pass a car on the exit, you need to have the appropriate opposing line to do that. Which means you'll need to be late, and you'll need to make sure that they're early, and you'll need to make sure you'll be able to have a run, right? So there's a lot of conceptual benefits to being able to do that. Then passing on the entry, which was typically because you had a really good run in of the corner behind, and you just had a larger amount of speed, or there's a big change in speed. Those big changes in the speed are rare, right? If the guy in front of you is as good or better than you, they won't make that mistake. So you'll sit there forever. And if there's no traffic to slow them down, then they also won't slow down. Where if their line is not very good, it'll be easy to see, right?
Or the mistake is happening, like I was saying with Peter earlier.
Mm-hmm. Or the mistake is happening. Yep. It's also just like good for the confidence, right? Because a large part of passing is confidence. I am putting my car here, and we are going here. It is easier to do that on the exit, because all you have to do is accelerate and commit to accelerating. Right? Where on the entry, you have to have trust in your ability of car control, that you braked in the right spot and did all the right things. And you also just your opponent isn't going to be a complete asshole or see you and turn. So as you get more experience, you're able to compensate for the lack of something else that another driver has, right? I don't care that this guy's going to turn on me anyway. I know how to adjust my car to make it work. But until you get there, passing on the exit is safer. It's boring. God, it's boring. But it's safe.
As a person that's been a pro at getting past, I could attest to you that I'd much rather get passed by someone coming out. It's not way safer, and probably 90% less accidents would occur in ACC if most people passed on the exit.
I wish I could marry you. I wish we could get married and go on a honeymoon, because you're the first person to actually openly say that, and you're my favorite. Just please. Like, no, really, because like honestly, it gets really frustrating when like you're racing other people, especially like when you're passing back marker traffic and other things, and folks are diving on the entry, and we're all offline and we're scrabbling around, and I'm like, my dude, if you had just waited 5 seconds, I would have just driven right by. You know,
you have no idea how annoying that gets in multi-class racing when you're in the slower class car, and you know the other guy, all he needs to do is to wait for past the apex, put his foot down, and he's just gonna blast by because he has like 200 horsepower more. But no, he must dive you to the apex every single time.
Against the car with worse brakes, by the way, right?
Ah, of course.
So make the matter even worse, right? That is so frustrating. The last big grid race we did, I beat a lot of GC3s just by waiting for cars to pass on the exit, and a lot of them just drove into the entry and smashed each other off the road. I was in an ST or something like that. I didn't have to do anything. I was just like, bang, 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 right? And so it'll help you a ton. Just overtaking the entry just looks sexy, and it's what you think about when you think of like Formula One, or you think of other sort of popular racing. You think of late breaks and nice and deep and all this other great stuff, and like those are just the hardest passes. And or to be completely honest, the guy that's being passed gave up super early, right? Like especially in F1 cars, because no human being in this room really understands the braking zone of an F1 car and how short it is. A lot of times you'll see like a Mercedes pass a Williams or something, and you'll be like, oh, he was braking later. No. The Williams just gave up because he doesn't brake as well as the Mercedes, and it's not worth it because we're not racing each other. And so it's just like, go. And it's at the very end of the corner because F1 cars are super light and can brake super deep. And so our brains don't understand that because our road cars need like 10 times the distance. So we think we just dove it on the brakes.
It's also big. It's actually, so the thing you have to understand is that it is almost impossible to outbrake someone when both guys have ABS and very similar cars. Because that ABS is going to give you exactly the same braking performance every single time, no matter what. It doesn't matter who presses the pedal. You're not going to press it better than someone else. I mean, you just literally mash the pedal.
Yeah, the computer does work. Yeah.
Yes. Now, if we were talking about something with no ABS, it is actually possible to I race some cars in iRacing with no ABS, and it is possible to like literally outbrake someone into a corner because it is much harder to get the optimum braking out, especially in any kind of complicated car.
Mm-hmm.
But here, you cannot expect that to happen. You have to understand the type of car you are racing to understand what kind of moves are possible.
And especially if you have two drivers of different novice to expert level skills, but we both have the same level of braking ability because our cars will do the same thing, right? I've got to play my chess moves differently, and outbraking, like, not to be rude, but outbraking a dumb driver doesn't help me. It just puts me at greater risk, right? So I need to find a safer place that I can just accelerate by them and just look at them and be like, man, they're slow. They're not even on the right line. So, and in some cases, I will even wait for the appropriate corner to pass the guy on the exit. If I know I'm just that much faster than them, it doesn't make sense. Like, especially you'll look at something like Ricky's where the gap can be 6 seconds, across the split, right? Which is a tremendous amount of time. If I catch a really slow guy on the entry into a corner and he's really slow, I'm not going to try to pass him on the entry. Why would I want to take a risk to my car because he won't see me and ruin the lead I have? I'll wait one corner and then just drive right by on the exit and he can't do a single thing about it. And he finishes in 23rd or whatever he was going to do, and I go on to finish my race, so I'm happy. It's great. Alrighty, folks, I did a lot of talking, so was this helpful for anybody?
Absolutely.
Good.
Actually, yes.
Yes.
Actually, yes, he says. That's awesome. Good. No, I hear you. I will take
more homework for everybody.
Yeah, I will take some time to do more like 201 and 301 of these if folks are interested.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of like psychology of racing that I don't talk about here because it requires a certain level of prerequisites, but also it's a lot of talking. It's a ton of talking. So
well, talking has never been your problem.
No, I'm fine. I mean, I knew what I was talking about. So the rest of you, I want to swear to you guys. But I'll throw this up on the YouTube and get that recorded. If you guys want, I think I've got a couple of books that I can drop as links that some of this stuff is in here. I think Going Faster is a good example of one that's in there that's useful, that talks a lot about RaceCraft. Drive to Win is also in there, also talks about RaceCraft. It's going to be kind of helpful.
Who was it that Ilpo was talking about for that one video?
Oh, Suelo Ameda? Yeah, so I'm reading his book right now. His stuff is, I think, mostly on car control, I think. I haven't gotten through it. It's really good, but I haven't finished it yet.
I mentioned the Jimmy Broadbent.
Yeah, Jimmy Broadbent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he makes a lot of all kinds of content, but there's some specific videos where he talks about specific things. Like this was specifically, I think it was he was commentating on a lap of some GT3 driver passing like 40 cars in a single lap at Nürburgring multi-class, and he was making a lot of comments about use of space and overlap and timing and everything, and it's really kind of interesting.
Yep.
But more penalty in real life racing. That's a problem. I think that's the issue with ACC. There's not enough consequence for mistakes.
Well, there's not only that. It's also just like 99% of the people who play these games have never driven a car fast in their life, right? They've never done any sort of autocross or performance driving or wheel-to-wheel racing or anything, and so they don't have a community where they can have that discussion or context, right? They take what they see off of television, they try to apply it in the way they think works. They don't apply it very well, and then they yell at each other about it. Super frustrating.
Well, also, if so, okay. For background, I played a bunch of other competitive games quite a bit, and especially team games, because you see a bit of the same problem in team games where people think it's fine to ruin other people's fun because it's just a game.
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem is that as a whole, the sim racing community has many different types of people. There are those who are real life drivers who are here because this is much cheaper and they can get many hours behind the wheel
here
for the same cost. There are those who just are interested in racing and want to simulate as much the real life as possible without actually wanting to do it in real life, and that's fine. There are those who just like are more kind of interested in just like racing without actually understanding racing. They just want the rush of beating other people, and then there's obviously the bunch of other types of people, and you have to understand that what is the expectation level for each of the communities you work in. So that's part of the reason why I think these league races are usually the best, especially in heavily sturdy leagues, because it tends to pull in most of the people who are kind of interested in beating other people fair, like within the rules. If you go to something
committed to doing it well also.
if you go to something like LFM, you have to expect that it's not quite at the same level, because even though there are consequences, relying on consequences to, I mean, it doesn't even work in real life. Look at some, look at like,
that's a good point.
I mean, I can think of like, let's say, Pastor Maldonado. How many times did he crash his F1 car? Did it ever stop him from doing it again? No. So you can't expect it to be the same here. There are people who will never change.
Also, why? Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And I don't think just adding more consequences would like. I mean, bans and such don't really do much. I mean,
they just go to another place. Like
I don't mean so much bans. Less like I've been messing around with different games for many years. It's like iRacing has its system. Some other games have like penalty war, like you get a time penalty immediately in certain games.
Yeah, and those usually
so to get much damage. Like you ram someone in ACC, the damage model just doesn't really. There's not enough penalty.
Well, so the problem is that any penalty system has to usually kind of punish both, because it is impossible in game code to determine who's at fault. They tried it. I know they tried in GT Sport and whatever, and it never worked right. I mean, literally, they turned it off from GT7 at one point. I think they turned it back on at some point when they made some improvements, and it's no longer always wrong. But it used to be so bad they had to turn it off because it was always giving the penalty. Well, I mean, most of the time giving the penalty to the wrong driver. So it's never really gonna work well. I mean, iRacing has a very severe penalty model, like Davin's model. And do you think that actually works? The answer is absolutely no. I mean, even the incident points.
Some leagues it does work in there. I've seen it work. You at the end of a race, you can tell when somebody's run off the track like 15 times in a race.
Yeah, we lost Ilpo though for a bit.
Yeah,
I think this Discord right here and what we do is because I want the respect of the people I race with. I don't give a shit about the rest of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I'm back. Okay, so yeah, but so that, I mean, if you have to understand what kind of community you're racing with. So when I go to LFM, I don't expect to get like the best, most cleanest wheel-to-wheel racing ever, because I mean it's a bunch of random people. If I come to one of our races, I expect a much higher level because we know each other. We race each other every week.
Absolutely.
But that's just like how computer games work.
Yeah. Well, also too, like we do these clinics because it helps me kind of get a sense of like who's interested in driving better or not, right? I can't expect everybody to want to put in the extra time or have the time to put in. I can't expect folks to always be able to like know how long it's going to take to be good at it. It's kind of the example I gave earlier of like, you want to be a classical pianist, right? Like it's going to take a long time. Right. So we try to create a community that you guys can improve your skills in a safe space and like know that you're going to make mistakes. And like, you know, I will always be okay with a genuine mistake. It's just shit driving that makes me mad. Right. So that you guys can learn and be better. Because I mean, that's what keeps you in the hobby, and having people that are fun to race against that will race you fairly and treat you fairly. And part of that comes down to education, right? Some folks literally have driven into me just because they didn't know they weren't supposed to, right? And having that education is useful for them because then they understand the rules of engagement are different than what they thought, and they drive differently. And hooray, we've done some community good. Woo, right? But if you
the one thing that annoys me is that people spend so much time and effort practicing for hot laps and so little time and effort practicing for actual racing.
Yep. And the race is where you spend the majority of your time, right? Like, if you
and also, like, isn't that the fun part? Like, is it really fun being 15 seconds ahead of everybody else and just running on your own? I mean, you might win, and I mean, I guess it can feel kind of nice, but I'd much rather have a very close race and win, or very close race and just barely get the second, because that's still more fun.
Well, also, like, the majority of the folks that are running around aren't going to be that guy, right? So they need to have the survival skills to be able to get through their races. Like, shit, you know, I'm a mid driver at best, right? So in a lot of places, when I'm going places, I need to be able to have the RaceCraft to just be able to survive, so that when faster people are racing terribly, I can make it through. Right? I finished farther ahead in more races than I should have because I just didn't crash or kill myself. All right, and that's just as good. That's the joy for me of racing. I'll finish second in a race I should have probably finished 10th because I didn't die. All right.
100%.
Alrighty, folks. I'm gonna leave this here. We were gonna do a couple of examples of some stuff, but you know, I'm not sure if that's super helpful. We can, if you want to, we can pop onto like HOP, or we can pop onto the qualifying service. There's nobody on there right now, and we can talk about a few things. But it's up to you guys.